Ethan Marlowe had spent most of his life staring at the stars, dreaming of adventures far beyond the narrow limits of Earth. As a pilot for a small interstellar cargo company, he was used to long, lonely voyages through space, hauling supplies between distant stations. His job was ordinary, unglamorous, and sometimes exhausting, but it was honest work. He liked to think of it as preparation for something greater, something he couldn't yet name. He didn't know that his quiet, predictable life was about to vanish in a way that no star map or protocol manual could predict. The mission that morning was routine. Deliver a shipment of high-grade alloys to a research station orbiting Gliese 710, a star system 12 light-years from Earth. His ship, the Celestial Falcon, was small but reliable, a sleek vessel with engines tuned for long-distance jumps. Ethan enjoyed the hum of the engines, the faint vibration under his feet, and the soft blue glow of the control panels. There was a certain comfort in the routine, a rhythm that made the vast emptiness of space feel less lonely. As he guided the Falcon through the outskirts of Gliese 710, something strange happened. The ship's instruments began to behave erratically. Sensors flickered. The radar screen swirled with unknown energy signatures. At first, Ethan assumed it was a glitch, a minor system malfunction. But the warning lights flashed insistently, accompanied by a deep, resonating hum that seemed to come from the very walls of the ship. Before he could react, a powerful pull gripped the Falcon, as if an invisible hand had seized the vessel. Alarms blared. The stars outside the cockpit window stretched into streaks of light as the Falcon was yanked into a swirling vortex of energy. Ethan fought with the controls, but every button, lever, and override seemed useless. The hum grew louder, filling his ears with a vibration that felt almost alive. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pull stopped. Silence. The stars outside returned to their normal positions, and the Falcon floated in the void, completely unharmed, or so it seemed. Ethan exhaled sharply, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to check the navigation systems, but the readings were strange, alien. None of the coordinates matched any known star system. Where am I?" he muttered. A soft glow appeared outside the cockpit window. It wasn't the light of a star. It wasn't the reflection of a distant planet. It was something entirely new, a massive, shimmering orb that pulsed with colors he had never seen. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and leaned closer. The surface of the orb was not solid. It shimmered like liquid crystal, and intricate patterns shifted constantly across it, forming shapes that seemed almost deliberate, almost alive. Ethan's curiosity overcame his fear. He had explored uncharted space before, but never anything like this. Against every instinct screaming at him to leave, he set the Falcon on a slow approach. As he neared, a beam of light shot out from the orb and enveloped the ship. The controls locked, and the Falcon began to descend gently, as if guided by an unseen hand. Ethan gripped the chair, his knuckles white. The ship passed through the glowing surface and emerged into a breathtaking world. Althurian. That was the name that came to him, though he didn't know how he knew it. The planet's surface was a panorama of floating cities, crystalline towers, and gardens suspended in the air. Rivers of liquid light ran through the sky, reflecting colors that seemed impossible. Ethereal creatures flew gracefully between the structures, their wings refracting the light like prisms. Ethan's breath caught. He had never seen anything so beautiful, so alive, so utterly alien. A voice echoed in his mind, calm and melodic, yet commanding. "You are expected." The Falcon touched down gently on a platform that appeared beneath it, glowing softly under the alien light. The hatch opened automatically. Hesitation warred with curiosity, but Ethan stepped out. The palace before him was more magnificent than anything on Earth or in any human imagination. Towers of translucent crystal spiraled skyward. Gardens bloomed with flowers that shifted colors and shapes as if breathing. And at the center, standing with a regal air that made Ethan instinctively bow, was the princess. She was tall, elegant, with hair that shimmered like silver starlight and eyes that glowed faintly like twin suns. Her robes flowed like liquid light, and every movement she made seemed precise and deliberate. Ethan's mouth went dry. "I am Princess Lyra," she said, her voice musical yet commanding. "You are the one. You are here because the future of Althurian depends on you." Yet without understanding the language, he felt the meaning. "I need a husband, and you are the one I have chosen." He had been pulled into an alien world by forces he did not understand, faced a being who spoke in riddles and light, and now was being told he must marry her. He wanted to protest, to argue, to run, but the words caught in his throat. He looked around, realizing the palace grounds were alive, shifting subtly, making escape impossible. The beauty of the world did not comfort him. It terrified him. As he was guided inside the palace, he saw the attendants, tall, elegant beings with translucent skin and elongated limbs, moving with precision, carrying objects that glowed with soft light. Every surface of the palace reflected a world of knowledge and sophistication far beyond Earth's capabilities. Ethan felt like a child entering a cathedral for the first time. Lyra walked beside him, silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Humans are unusual," she said finally. "They are not the strongest, they are not the fastest, but they are unpredictable. They survive where others fail, and you will be tested. Althurian is a world of balance, and balance requires more than strength. It requires wisdom, resourcefulness, and the spark that only humans can bring." Over the next hours, Lyra showed him the palace halls, the libraries that stored knowledge in floating spheres of light, and the chambers where the council debated matters of science, diplomacy, and war. Everything was alien, yet in some strange way, he could sense the logic behind it. And then, as night fell over the floating cities, Ethan stood at a balcony overlooking the luminous landscape. Stars twinkled beyond the clouds, and below, the rivers of light flowed endlessly. He felt small, insignificant, but there was also a thrill. He had spent his life staring at the stars, dreaming of adventure. He had never imagined it would come like this, abrupt, overwhelming, impossible. And yet there was a spark inside him, a flicker of excitement that told him he could rise to whatever challenge awaited. Lyra joined him silently. She did not speak. She did not need to. The message was clear. The fate of her world, and perhaps the galaxy, was intertwined with his choices, his courage, and his human spark. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing against him. He did not yet understand the trials, the prophecy, or the reason he had been chosen. But one thing was certain: his life had changed forever. The stars of Althurian shone brightly in the night sky, a reminder that some journeys could not be planned and some destinies could not be avoided. Ethan Marlowe was no longer just a pilot. He was a player in a story far greater than himself, a story that would test the limits of human courage, intelligence, and heart. And in the distance, a soft, melodic whisper seemed to echo in his mind. "The trials begin tomorrow. Be ready, human." For the first time in his life, he felt the thrill of a challenge that no protocol, no star map, and no manual could prepare him for. The next morning, Ethan awoke to the soft light of Althurian filtering through his chamber. The walls shimmered with a subtle glow, as if the palace itself breathed. He sat up on the low, floating bed, rubbing his eyes. The events of the previous day, the vortex, the alien world, Princess Lyra's sudden declaration, still felt like a dream, but the faint hum of the palace reminded him that it was real. A gentle chime sounded, and the door opened without a sound. A figure stepped in, moving with a grace Ethan could barely follow. It was an attendant, tall and slender, with translucent skin that reflected the soft morning light. The being bowed deeply, and in a voice that sounded like music said, "Master Ethan, Princess Lyra waits. Your trials begin at dawn." He dressed quickly in the simple uniform the attendant handed him, a flexible suit that adapted to his movements. His mind raced. What kind of trials? Would they test his strength, his intelligence, his courage, or something he could not yet imagine? The attendant guided him through halls that seemed endless. Each turn revealed wonders he could barely comprehend. Gardens where plants glowed with soft light, fountains of liquid crystal that floated above the ground, and libraries that contained knowledge stored in floating orbs. Every surface, every object, seemed designed to test or teach, to push the mind and spirit to new limits. At last, he arrived at a large chamber, its floor made of a translucent material that revealed the flowing rivers of light below. Princess Lyra waited at the center, her posture perfect, her eyes fixed on him. She nodded once and spoke. "Ethan Marlowe, the trials are designed to test qualities that no machine, no algorithm, and no alien alone could perfect. They test the spark of humanity. You will face challenges of thought, endurance, and judgment. You will be tested not to fail, but to prove that you are capable. They are the crucible of destiny." Ethan found himself in a chamber filled with intricate devices, floating screens, and panels covered in alien symbols. His task, according to Lyra's instructions projected in the air, was to solve a puzzle that had stumped Althurian scholars for decades. Ethan examined the panels, his mind racing. He had no knowledge of Althurian mathematics or language, yet he could see patterns, shapes that moved, sequences that repeated. He touched the panels, trying to manipulate them intuitively. The symbols glowed brighter or dimmed in response to his actions. He noticed that when he followed logic alone, progress was slow. But when he allowed his instincts to guide him, when he experimented boldly without fear of failure, the patterns began to respond. Minutes stretched into hours, yet Ethan remained focused. He made mistakes, corrected them, and learned from them. Slowly, the puzzle rearranged itself under his touch until the final sequence clicked into place. The chamber glowed and a door opened, signaling his success. He had done what Arthurians believed impossible, solved the puzzle using intuition and creativity, something their advanced minds often overlooked. Ethan felt a surge of pride. For the first time, he understood what Lyra meant by the spark of humanity. Ethan was transported to a vast landscape that shifted constantly beneath his feet. The ground was uneven, floating platforms that moved in unpredictable patterns, rivers of liquid light, and towering crystalline structures. The task was survival. Reach the summit of the highest tower before the landscape changed completely. Ethan ran, leapt, and climbed with every ounce of strength he possessed. The Arthurians who had attempted this trial before often failed because they relied on precise calculations and expected patterns. Ethan had no such calculations. He had only his instincts, his balance, and his courage. Time and again, platforms shifted beneath him. One misstep could have sent him plummeting into the glowing chasms below, but he adapted. He used momentum, intuition, and sheer determination. At moments when a platform moved in a way he did not anticipate, he jumped further, braced for impact, and improvised solutions on the spot. By the time he reached the summit, sweat drenched his body and his muscles ached. But he stood tall, victorious. The trial had tested not just strength, but the human ability to adapt, to survive in unpredictable circumstances. He realized that the Arthurians had underestimated the value of unpredictability, a trait humans wielded naturally. As Ethan caught his breath, he noticed figures in the distance observing him. Lyra was among them, her expression calm but approving. He felt a quiet pride at her gaze. She saw what he had accomplished, and it mattered more than any score or ranking. The third trial was the most challenging yet: diplomacy. Ethan was brought to a council of Arthurian elders, each representing a different faction. A conflict had arisen over the control of resources critical to the planet's survival. Ethan's task was to mediate, to find a solution that would satisfy all parties. He had no knowledge of Arthurian politics, no understanding of their complex hierarchy or centuries-old rivalries. All he had was human common sense, empathy, and the ability to listen. The council argued, their words sharp and their gestures precise. Ethan studied them, noticing patterns in behavior, unspoken cues, and points of tension. He began to speak, cautiously at first, suggesting compromises that addressed practical needs rather than abstract theories. The elders reacted with surprise. His proposals were not based on tradition or protocol, but on logic, fairness, and empathy, the kind of reasoning that humans often relied upon instinctively. Slowly, the council's tension eased. Negotiations that had stalled for months began to progress, and Ethan realized he was bridging gaps in ways the Arthurians had never considered. Lyra observed quietly from the side, a faint smile on her lips. She had said humans were unpredictable, and here was proof. Ethan's human mind, his creativity and compassion, had solved a problem that countless Arthurians had deemed unsolvable. The final trial of the day was an endurance test of spirit. Ethan was placed alone in a vast, dark cavern, lit only by the faint glow of bioluminescent plants. Strange creatures moved in the shadows, and the air was thick with a scent he could not name. The task was simple in description: reach the heart of the cavern without succumbing to fear. Ethan's first steps were tentative. Every sound, every shadow seemed to loom larger in the darkness. His heart raced, but he forced himself to focus. He remembered the puzzle, the platforms, the council. He remembered the spark Lyra had spoken of, the uniquely human spark. Courage, creativity, adaptability. Step by step, he advanced. He used his senses, his intuition, and his instincts to navigate the cavern. When a creature lunged at him, he reacted instinctively, avoiding it without harming it. When the ground shifted beneath him, he adapted. Each challenge tested not his body alone, but his mind and spirit. Hours later, he reached the center of the cavern. A crystal pulsed softly, illuminating the space around him. Ethan knelt, breathing heavily, overwhelmed by the experience. In that moment, he understood the purpose of the trials. They were not just about proving strength, intelligence, or courage. They were about proving that humanity, with all its imperfections and unpredictability, could thrive in ways even the most advanced civilizations could not anticipate. When he emerged from the cavern, Lyra waited. Her gaze held no words, yet it conveyed understanding, recognition, and approval. "You have completed the trials of the day," she said. "Not by following their rules, but by following yourself. This is what it means to be human." And yet he knew this was only the beginning. Althurian was a world full of challenges, mysteries, and dangers that he could not yet comprehend. As they walked back to the palace, Lyra spoke softly. "Tomorrow, the trials continue. You will face more than puzzles, more than landscapes, more than councils. You will face the heart of Althurian itself. But remember this, your human spark is your greatest weapon. Never underestimate it." That night, as he lay on his floating bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling and thought of the journey ahead. The stars outside the palace window shimmered like promises. He had passed the first day of trials, but he knew the path forward would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. Yet he felt ready. He felt alive. And he felt, for the first time in his life, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The palace hummed softly around him, a living reminder that he was part of something far greater than himself. The spark of humanity burned brightly within him, and Ethan Marlowe knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them with courage, ingenuity, and heart. For Althurian, for Princess Lyra, and for humanity itself, the trials had only just begun. Ethan awoke to a quiet hum in the palace, the kind of morning that felt heavier than usual. The sunlight over Althurian's floating cities shimmered like liquid glass, but something in the air told him the day would not be simple. The trials so far had tested his mind, body, and spirit, yet today a new challenge awaited, one far more dangerous than any puzzle or platform. As he prepared for the day, the attendants moved with unusual haste. Their usual calm efficiency was replaced with urgency, their glances filled with concern. Ethan's mind raced. Had he done something wrong? Or was there another level of trials he had not yet understood? He was led to a chamber where Princess Lyra awaited, her expression calm but her eyes sharper than ever. She did not smile. "Ethan, today the trials take a new form," she said. "You will face deception, cunning, and hidden danger. You must not only rely on skill, but on judgment and instinct. There are those who would see Althurian weakened, and they will use any means to achieve it." Up until now, the trials had been controlled, structured. He had faced puzzles, platforms, councils, and even a cavern of fear, but this was unpredictable. Real danger, real intrigue. The kind that could cost lives. They moved together through the palace halls, avoiding the main courtyards where attendants and guards often gathered. Lyra led him to a side passage, its walls lined with shimmering light panels. She stopped before a small door that appeared to lead to a storage chamber. "Here," she said, "is where information flows quietly, hidden from most eyes. You will help me investigate the council, understand who can be trusted, and uncover the plot before it reaches its final stage." Humans had a way of noticing details, reading situations, and reacting in ways machines and advanced minds could not predict. Inside the chamber, floating screens displayed council records, communications, and encrypted messages. Lyra gestured, and the panels rearranged themselves, forming patterns that indicated unusual activity. Ethan leaned in, trying to make sense of the symbols. At first, it was chaotic. Lines of code, data streams, and glowing glyphs seemed impossible to interpret. Then he remembered the first trial, the puzzle. The patterns didn't have to be understood perfectly. They had to be approached with logic, trial, and observation. Ethan's fingers moved over the panels, experimenting. He noticed subtle irregularities. Messages rerouted, schedules altered, meetings canceled without reason. It wasn't just chaos, it was deliberate manipulation. "This faction," Ethan murmured, pointing to a stream of data, "they're coordinating secretly. They don't want the council to know what they're planning. Look here, they've rerouted resources, changed security protocols, and altered patrol schedules. They're planning something big. Your mind does not follow the rules. It creates new ones when necessary." And if they succeeded, Lyra's position and the stability of Althurian itself would crumble. Hours passed in tense investigation. Finally, they traced the faction's communications to a hidden sector of the palace, a place few Althurians had ever entered. Lyra's voice was steady but urgent. "This is where we must go, Ethan. It will be dangerous. They may try to stop us." Even the environment seemed to challenge them, yet Ethan relied on instinct, observing patterns, testing spaces carefully, and leading Lyra safely. They reached the hidden sector. The doors were massive, etched with alien symbols that glowed faintly. Lyra reached out, placing her hand on a panel. The doors slid open silently, revealing a dimly lit room. Inside, several figures huddled over maps, holograms, and devices. They did not notice the intruders yet. Ethan's breath caught. He could feel the tension in the room, the weight of secrecy. The faction was larger than he expected, their planning meticulous. But as he observed, he noticed small mistakes, details humans might notice more easily than Arthurians. One figure kept repeating a motion that exposed a hidden control, another left a holographic display partially unguarded. "Follow my lead," Ethan whispered to Lyra. "We observe, then act. We expose them, but carefully." He focused on patterns, timing, and behavior, using his intuition to predict what the conspirators would do next. Suddenly, one of the faction members glanced toward a control panel. A silent alarm almost triggered. Ethan grabbed Lyra's arm, holding her back. The intruders gazed past just above them, missing entirely, and Ethan exhaled quietly. He realized humans unpredict. Our ability to improvise, think fast, and react without protocol gave them an advantage the Arthurians would not have expected. They continued to gather evidence, recording the plots, copying data streams, and identifying the leaders of the faction. Ethan could feel his mind sharpening with each observation. He had never considered himself extraordinary, but here, on this alien world, his skills, instincts, and human unpredictability were invaluable. At last, they had enough evidence. Lyra whispered, "We must confront them now before they act. Can you handle this, Ethan?" The faction members were taken by surprise. The holographic maps flickered as Lyra's command projected authority. "Stop this immediately," she said. "Your plot is known. Arthurian does not tolerate betrayal. A mere human cannot understand the complexities of our council." Ethan's heart pounded, but he felt a clarity he had never known. This was what Lyra had meant by the spark of humanity. It was not strength or speed. It was courage, ingenuity, and the willingness to face danger for what is right. Lyra moved closer, placing her hand near the control panel. The doors sealed automatically, isolating the conspirators. Ethan observed as she projected evidence from the chamber, exposing each plot, each manipulation, each lie. The faction could no longer hide. The council, alerted by the palace systems, began to arrive, drawn by the emergency protocols that Lyra activated. In the midst of the confrontation, Ethan realized something important. This was not just about stopping a plot. It was about showing the council the value of humans, their unpredictability, their courage, their ingenuity. By acting decisively, ethically, and creatively, he could prove that humans were not merely outsiders. They were capable of leadership, insight, and action even in the most complex and dangerous situations. The council arrived, their faces a mixture of shock, concern, and curiosity. Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm yet commanding. "This faction sought to undermine Arthurian. They underestimated one thing. A human can see beyond your calculations, beyond your patterns, beyond your rules. We stopped them. Their plans are exposed, and justice will be done." Lyra turned to Ethan, her eyes softening slightly. "You did well," she said. "You acted with courage, clarity, and insight. This is what makes humans extraordinary. You may not understand it fully yet, but the council has seen it. I have seen it, and the trials continue." He realized that the greatest challenges were not always physical or intellectual. They were often moral, strategic, and unpredictable. Humans thrived in these spaces. Humans could think, act, and adapt in ways even the most advanced civilizations could not. That night, Ethan sat alone on the balcony, looking out over the luminous landscape of Arthurian. He felt a mixture of exhaustion, exhilaration, and pride. The first day of trials had tested him in controlled environments. The second day had tested him in real danger, with stakes higher than any platform, puzzle, or council meeting. He had survived, he had succeeded, and he had proven in a small but significant way the value of humanity. Lyra joined him silently, her presence calm but comforting. She did not speak. Words were unnecessary. The events of the day had communicated everything. Together they looked at the glowing rivers below, the floating cities above, and the endless stars beyond. Ethan understood something essential. The journey ahead would be more dangerous, more unpredictable, and more demanding. But he also knew he was no longer just a pilot. He was a participant in a story that mattered, a story that required him to trust his instincts, embrace his humanity, and act with courage no matter the odds. The palace hummed softly, a living witness to his growth, and Ethan Marlowe felt the spark of human potential burn brighter than ever. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new challenges, and perhaps new dangers. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of calm. He had uncovered a plot, protected the princess, and shown that humans could rise to the occasion when it mattered most. And somewhere deep in the night, the palace seemed to whisper approvingly, "The spark is alive. The human is worthy." The morning air over Althurian was thick with tension. Ethan had barely slept. The memory of the rival faction, their hidden plots, and the danger they posed lingered in his mind. But worse, he knew the faction would not give up so easily. Princess Lyra had been taken during the council's deliberation, an act of desperation by those who underestimated him, a move designed to shake him, to prove that a human could not protect an alien princess. Ethan stood at the edge of the palace balcony, staring at the glowing rivers below. The city seemed calm, beautiful as ever, but he knew the truth. The Forbidden Zone awaited, and Lyra's life depended on his choices. The Forbidden Zone was a place of legend, a region of Althurian so treacherous that even the bravest Althurians rarely ventured there. Floating rocks twisted in impossible formations, and storms of energy danced unpredictably across the landscape. No map could guide a traveler through it, and many who entered never returned. Lyra's last words echoed in his mind. "Trust yourself, Ethan. Humans are unpredictable. Use that." He gathered a small team of palace allies who trusted him, including Gerald, an alien scholar fascinated by humans, and Tiva, a skilled pilot with unmatched knowledge of the palace systems. They equipped themselves with protective suits, lightweight energy tools, and minimal supplies. The Forbidden Zone was dangerous enough that carrying too much would slow them down. As they approached the boundary, the air shimmered with strange energy. Rocks hovered in impossible positions, and lightning-like pulses crackled across the sky. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. This was not a trial anymore. This was reality. The first challenge came immediately. A massive chasm stretched across their path, wider than any gap Ethan had ever faced. The rocks on either side pulsed with energy that made them unsafe to touch. Gerald examined the situation carefully, calculating angles and forces, but his attempts to create a safe passage failed. Ethan stepped forward. "Stop trying to calculate it," he said. "Watch, then follow." His instincts, sharpened by the previous trials, told him there was a rhythm. He timed his jump perfectly, landing on a rock just as the energy pulse subsided. One by one, the team followed, guided by Ethan's confidence and intuition rather than any protocol or theory. They pressed deeper into the Forbidden Zone. The terrain became more chaotic, jagged spires of crystal, floating platforms that moved unpredictably, and rivers of molten energy snaking across the ground. At one point, a platform tilted sharply, sending Ethan sliding. He managed to grab a nearby crystal shard and swing to safety, pulling Tiva after him. Each obstacle demanded split-second decisions. Every choice mattered. Hours passed, and exhaustion set in, but Ethan refused to slow down. He had learned something essential. The Althurians' advanced technology and planning could not always adapt to unpredictable circumstances. Humans, however, thrived in chaos. They could improvise, react, and find solutions when all else failed. Finally, they reached the inner region of the Forbidden Zone, a canyon filled with towering spires and pulsing light storms. In the center, surrounded by a barrier of energy, stood Lyra. She was unharmed but clearly restrained by alien devices that neutralized her powers and mobility. The faction leaders were nearby, confident, smug, certain that no human could breach the defenses. Ethan studied the barrier. The Althurians would have tried to deactivate it systematically, relying on calculations and rigid methods. But Ethan's mind worked differently. He observed patterns in the energy pulses, noting small gaps where the field flickered briefly. Timing, improvisation, courage. He realized that he could slip through by moving unpredictably, following instincts rather than theory. He turned to his team. "Watch the patterns and follow my lead. We move fast, we adapt, and we stay unpredictable. That's our advantage." Tiva and Gerald followed closely, trusting his instincts even as danger surged around them. The faction noticed too late. They fired energy weapons, but Ethan used the environment to his advantage. He jumped onto a floating crystal, rebounded to another, and rolled behind a molten river. The unpredictability of his movements made him impossible to target precisely. Finally, Ethan reached the barrier surrounding Lyra. The energy pulses were violent, but he noticed the faint flicker, a split-second window. Timing it perfectly, he jumped through, landing beside her. The faction members moved to stop him, but Ethan reacted instinctively, using a nearby crystal shard to create a temporary shield and redirect their attacks. Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. "You humans are truly unpredictable." They had entered the heart of the Forbidden Zone, defied the dangers, and rescued the princess. But there was no time to celebrate. The Forbidden Zone itself seemed to react to their presence. The floating platforms began to shift violently, energy storms intensified, and the ground quaked beneath them. Ethan realized that leaving would be more difficult than entering. He took command. "Follow me, move fast, watch for patterns, and trust instinct." Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her to safety, and leaped across a widening chasm. Tiva followed, then Gerald. The ground shook, molten rivers shifted, but they pressed forward. Hours later, battered and exhausted, they emerged from the Forbidden Zone onto stable ground. The palace was visible in the distance, its towers glowing warmly in the evening light. Lyra looked at Ethan with admiration. You saved me. Not with technology, not with calculations, but with courage, creativity, and instinct. Humans truly are extraordinary." But more importantly, he realized that the trials were not just about testing him. They were about showing what humans could do when faced with impossible challenges. The palace guards arrived, escorting the rescued group back to safety. Lyra turned to the council, who had been waiting anxiously. The faction members were restrained and removed for judgment. The council members were silent, impressed, and wary. For the first time, they had witnessed a human acting decisively, courageously, and creatively in a situation no Arthurian mind had fully prepared for. Ethan stood beside Lyra, breathing heavily, his suit scorched in a few places, but his spirit unbroken. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Today you proved that humans are more than we imagined. You are brave, resourceful, and unpredictable. You do not simply follow rules, you create new paths when needed. That is why you were chosen." But now, on this alien world, he realized that his humanity, his courage, creativity, and ability to act when others hesitated, was valuable in ways he had never imagined. The palace hummed around them, alive with energy. Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment, but he also knew the trials were not over. The faction had been neutralized, but the political and social challenges of Arthurian remained. He had proven his worth in the Forbidden Zone, but greater tests awaited, tests that would require all his ingenuity, courage, and humanity. That evening, as the team returned to the palace, Ethan stood on the balcony again, looking at the glowing cities and rivers of light. Lyra joined him silently, her presence a calm reminder that they had faced the impossible together. The stars beyond the palace seemed to promise more adventures, more challenges, and more opportunities to prove that humanity could shine even in the most alien circumstances. Ethan realized something essential. It was not just strength or knowledge that mattered. It was courage, creativity, adaptability, and the willingness to face danger head-on. Humans, with all their imperfections and unpredictability, had a spark that even the most advanced civilizations could not replicate. As night fell over Arthurian, Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction. He had faced the heart of danger, saved the princess, and shown that humans were capable of greatness. But he also felt anticipation. The final trial awaited, a challenge that would not only test his skills but define his role in the future of Arthurian itself. For now, he allowed himself a moment of calm. He had survived the Forbidden Zone, proven the value of humanity, and earned the trust of the princess. But tomorrow, the stakes would be higher, the challenges greater, and the need for courage, ingenuity, and heart even more essential. Ethan Marlowe had begun as a simple pilot. By facing the impossible, he had become something more, a symbol of human potential, a spark in a world that needed unpredictability, courage, and creativity. And somewhere in the depths of the palace, the Forbidden Zone seemed to whisper in approval. "The human has endured. The spark grows stronger." The palace glowed in the soft light of dawn, its towers and floating gardens shimmering like jewels over the rivers of energy that ran through Arthurian. Ethan Marlowe stood beside Princess Lyra, both of them watching as the council gathered in the grand chamber. The recent events, the faction's plot, the dangerous Forbidden Zone rescue, and the display of human ingenuity had left the council members in awe. Yet now, a final decision awaited. Would a human truly be allowed to stand alongside a princess and shape the future of Arthurian? Ethan's pulse was steady but tense. He had survived trials that tested every skill, faced dangers no Arthurian had dared to confront, and proven his courage, adaptability, and intelligence. Still, the Council's judgment held immense weight. Their decision would affect not just him and Lyra, but the entire planet. Lyra turned to him, her expression calm but firm. "Ethan, whatever happens, know this. You have already proven yourself beyond any doubt. The Council may deliberate, but you have shown the value of humanity. Do not let their hesitation shake you." He realized that the trials had not just tested him, they had taught him to trust himself, to act boldly, and to embrace the qualities that made humans unique. The council chamber was vast, with seats carved from translucent crystal and a ceiling that reflected the skies above. The council members filed in, their expressions grave. Among them were the elders who had initially doubted him, as well as neutral observers who had watched the trials with interest. The silence was heavy, filled with anticipation. The head of the council, an elder named Vorin, addressed the assembly. "Princess Lyra has returned safely, and the human, Ethan Marlowe, has demonstrated extraordinary abilities. He has completed trials that no Arthurian alone could achieve. Yet the question remains, can a human be entrusted with the responsibilities of leadership alongside the princess?" He knew what was at stake, and he knew that hesitation or fear would not serve Arthurian or humanity. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "Honorable council members, I am not Arthurian. I do not claim to know all your traditions, all your calculations, or all your ways. But I have learned your strengths, your weaknesses, and the challenges facing this world. I have faced dangers you never expected, acted when others hesitated, and found solutions where others saw only obstacles. I am human, and we are unpredictable, creative, and courageous. These qualities have allowed me to survive, to protect the princess, and to help Arthurian. I am ready to stand with Lyra, not to replace your wisdom, but to complement it, to bring what humans uniquely offer. That is my pledge. You have demonstrated not only skill, but integrity and loyalty. These are qualities that Arthurian values highly." Ethan realized that his human traits, the very things that had been doubted, were now being recognized as essential. Lyra stepped forward, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the chamber. "I have watched Ethan closely. He has faced challenges, danger, and uncertainty with courage and ingenuity. He has proven that humans bring qualities to leadership that even the most advanced Arthurians cannot replicate. It is not his knowledge alone, nor his strength, but his spirit, his creativity, and his unpredictability that make him worthy. I choose him, not by prophecy alone, but by what I have seen. He is my partner, my equal, and my ally in leading Arthurian." Then one by one the council members nodded. The tension in the chamber eased. The decision was unanimous. Ethan had been accepted. A soft cheer echoed through the hall as the council acknowledged the declaration. Ethan felt a mix of relief, pride, and awe. He had never imagined that a human could hold such a place of honor in an alien world, yet here he was. His trials, his courage, and his humanity had earned him a place beside the princess. Lyra extended her hand to him, her smile warm and sincere. "Welcome, Ethan Marlowe. Together we will guide Arthurian into a new era. I'll do everything I can to help this world thrive." With Ethan's guidance, the council began to see that combining Arthurian precision with human ingenuity could solve problems more efficiently and creatively than either alone. One of the first reforms was improving resource management. Ethan noticed that certain energy streams and crystal reserves were underutilized due to rigid allocation protocols. Using his intuitive approach, he suggested flexible distribution strategies, allowing Arthurians to access materials in ways that maximized productivity while reducing waste. The results were immediate, efficiency improved, and factions that had previously argued over resources began to cooperate. Another challenge involved transportation across the floating cities. Arthurian engineers relied on strict formulas and protocols for platform stability, which limited expansion. Ethan suggested experimenting with new arrangements and timing, moving platforms in ways that Arthurians had never attempted. The floating cities adapted, allowing faster and safer travel. Citizens marveled at the improvements, calling them revolutionary. Ethan also focused on diplomacy. Using his human approach, he encouraged open dialogue between factions, listening carefully to concerns, noticing unspoken tensions, and offering compromises that respected tradition while allowing progress. Slowly, the council began to embrace his methods. recognizing that human intuition and flexibility could complement their structured reasoning. Through it all, Lyra remained at his side, guiding, advising, and supporting him. The bond between them grew stronger, not just of duty, but of mutual respect and shared purpose. Lyra's people began to see that the partnership between a princess and a human was not unusual or dangerous. It was a symbol of possibility, showing that humans and Arthurians could achieve great things together. One evening, as the sky shimmered with colors no human had names for, Ethan stood with Lyra on the palace balcony. The rivers of light below flowed endlessly, and the floating gardens glowed softly in the twilight. Ethan felt a profound sense of belonging, a feeling he had never experienced on Earth. "You've changed, Arthurian," Lyra said softly, her hand brushing his. "Not just with your actions, but with your spirit. Humans have a spark that cannot be replicated. You've shown everyone what we are capable of." Arthurian has always valued intelligence and strength, but it has never truly embraced unpredictability and creativity, qualities humans carry naturally. Your presence has reminded us that even the most advanced civilizations can grow when they welcome new perspectives. Humans were not just survivors. They were innovators, leaders, and problem solvers, capable of rising to challenges that no one else could face. Over the following months, Arthurian flourished. The faction that had once plotted against Lyra disbanded, recognizing the wisdom of cooperation rather than rebellion. Citizens thrived as new systems improved efficiency, safety, and mobility. The palace, once a place of rigid tradition, became a hub of creativity and innovation, guided by the combination of Arthurian knowledge and human ingenuity. Ethan found himself at the center of it all, not as a ruler in the traditional sense, but as a symbol. Humans, with all their unpredictability, creativity, and courage, had a role to play in the universe. Through trials, danger, and challenges, he had proven that humanity was not only capable of surviving, but of shaping the destiny of worlds. One day, as Ethan walked through the floating gardens with Lyra, children from across Arthurian waved and called out greetings. They had heard the stories of the human who had faced the Forbidden Zone, who had solved puzzles no Arthurian could, and who had saved the princess. Ethan realized that humans could inspire hope, courage, and change simply by being true to themselves. Lyra turned to him, her gaze serious but filled with affection. "Ethan, your journey is far from over. There will always be new challenges, new worlds to explore, and new problems to solve. But know this, you have proven that humans can shine even among the stars, and that your presence makes Arthurian stronger." He had faced unimaginable trials, survived dangers that no Arthurian had endured, and proven that courage, creativity, and adaptability were as powerful as any advanced technology. As the twin moons rose over the palace, casting soft silver light across the rivers of glowing energy, Ethan Marlowe knew he had found his place among the stars. Humanity had a spark that could illuminate even the darkest reaches of the universe. And here on Arthurian, that spark had been recognized, celebrated, and set free. Ethan looked at Lyra, then at the horizon, and smiled. The trials were over, but the adventure, the true adventure, was only beginning. Together, they would lead, explore, and prove to the galaxy that humans were more than capable, more than resilient, and more than extraordinary. And somewhere deep in the palace, as the night whispered across the floating gardens and rivers of light, the universe seemed to acknowledge the truth. Humans had arrived, and they would shine.